Welcome to Cambridge Forum, discussing Philanthropy, Reconsidered, with George McCully, creator of the Catalog for Philanthropy. I'm Pat Zerke, director of the forum, and I will be the moderator for this program. The United States is a philanthropic nation. Many of the social goods and services, from museums and cultural organizations to food pantries and homeless shelters, that are funded by governments in other countries, are supported by private philanthropy in this country. How did this model come to dominate American life? Our speaker, George McCully, is here to trace the deep roots of philanthropy in the American tradition, and then take the tradition forward into the 21st century. How are the IT revolution and new demographics of wealth changing philanthropy? How can the classical tradition of humaneness that so effectively promoted American giving by wealthy business leaders in earlier centuries be translated so that it equally motivates 21st century titans? George McCully, author of Philanthropy Reconsidered, has had two careers. First, for 20 years as professor of European history from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment, then for 25 years as a professional philanthropist, fundraiser, strategic planner, executive director, trustee, and advisor to charities, foundations, families, and individual donors. In 1997, he created the highly respected and influential Massachusetts Catalog for Philanthropy to promote charitable giving and strengthen the culture of philanthropy through donor education, with articles about philanthropy supported by descriptions now of over 900 charities. Most recently, he has developed the Massachusetts Philanthropic Directory, a new online reference tool for donors. Welcome to Cambridge Forum, George McCully.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you folks for coming out on this lovely night. You have better things to do, I'm sure. This is the first of two talks I want to give. The subject tonight is philanthropy in general and what's happening to it. And the next one, which is on November 8th, is about the Massachusetts Philanthropic Directory, which is a new instrument we're hoping to launch in October. And I want to explain how it works and what it can do. The first thing to know about philanthropy now is that it's in the middle of a paradigm shift, which I think you probably are familiar with. Everybody knows that philanthropy is changing, but a paradigm shift is a particular kind of historic change which can be analyzed in a disciplined way. Basically, it's a fundamental transformation of a governing model of a mature field. Philanthropy became paradigmatic in the 20th century. It started with the major foundations created by our industrial titans, Rockefeller and Ford and Carnegie. And they had so much money to work with that they were almost compelled to take a new approach to philanthropy, which was not simply to put bandages on people's sores, but to investigate the causes of social problems and to try to solve those social problems in a long-term manner. I hope this sounds familiar to you. The point is that what's happening today has happened before. What that meant was that they brought into philanthropy social scientists to run their foundations. And these folks analyzed the problems of what they called civil society in America and devised strategic solutions to re-engineer America in the first place, but ultimately the rest of the world. It's very ambitious. The result was that they then brought into philanthropy a cadre of people trained in the social sciences, so that by the middle of the 20th century, philanthropy was, it's fair to say, dominated by people trained in social sciences. What does that mean? First, it means that they study groups and group behavior. They study collectives. They work with a conceptual model, which is a societal ideal, civil society. They're working to solve technical and procedural problems. They're not concerned about values or substance of quality of life. They're concerned about technical issues. And they're associated with social science departments in academic institutions. And they attempt to provide technical support to now the professionalizing third sector, as they called it. And that meant that they created, through these foundations, our entire infrastructure at the national level. Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Mellon to a degree, Carnegie, created the Council on Foundations, the National Society of Fundraising Executives, the Foundation Center, independent sector, regional associations of grant makers, community foundations, which they multiplied across the country. And the purpose was to professionalize philanthropy. That is, to provide people who were technically trained to carry out the highly sophisticated, strategically significant programs that they wanted to implement. That meant that philanthropy was organized from the top down by vertically, by profession. And what that did inadvertently was to create a silo approach to philanthropy in which these groups were technically trained for themselves. That's what the purposes of the associations were. And then they all did their jobs, but they did them in a particular way. First, they were not working together. Collaboration was not an ideal that they followed. Sometimes they were working adversarially, as for example, when fundraisers approach grant makers. And over decades, the foundation, the grant makers, adopted a kind of suspicious attitude toward the fundraising professions. And they approached each other as adversaries. Similarly, donors. Donors were not organized. 85% of the private dollars in philanthropy come from private individuals. Only 10% comes from foundations. And yet these people referred to philanthropy as what they did, the 10%. And they would produce annual reports, which we used to get here in Massachusetts, on which they, report on the state of philanthropy. And what was it? It was a description of what the foundations were doing. So there was built into this a kind of inadvertent ignoring of donors. The fundraisers became the sales staff for individual charities. And large institutions like universities and hospitals perfected the techniques of industrialized fundraising. They're the people whom we have to thank for junk mail and direct mail fundraising, all the techniques, matching gifts, I mean, my heavens. And as a result, they became very good at what they did, and giving seemed to be going up. But the fact was that the paradigm was never a product of design. It was never rationally conceived. What it was a kind of evolution of large institutions which fit right into the American economy and the technology of the period. The economy was, post-war industrial America generally improving. Technology was the printing press and telephone. National model for successful charities was the large corporation. And as a result, there were a few charities became huge and national. And the local chapters, paid dues to the national, and it was all very efficient, but industrial. Now, this model had a few flaws. For one thing, they never used the word philanthropy. There was no need to. No institutions were dedicated to promoting philanthropy as such. It was nobody's job to talk about philanthropy as such. So the word was never used, the concept was never used, and that is how great ideas die. When I started the Catalog for Philanthropy, we were talking about what should we call it? And nobody wanted to call it the Catalog for Philanthropy. Everybody said, oh my God, that's pedantic, that's pretentious, it means nothing. Don't call it that, it'll backfire. Call it the Catalog for Giving. Well, as we'll see in a moment, that is not a good idea. Now, instead, we stuck with our bad idea to call it the Catalog for Philanthropy, and 10 years later, philanthropy had entered the vernacular in America. It is now a household word. Nobody still knows what it means, but everybody uses it. Giving, if you look at the results of the old paradigm, we would hear in Giving USA year after year, giving is going up. This is the Association of Fundraising Council reporting, also created by the foundations, reporting on how successful they are, what they do. Well, in fact, if you look at real dollars over that whole last half century, the 20th century, giving was flat at 2% of gross domestic product. This at a time when the profession was becoming more sophisticated than ever. So when we started looking at giving for Massachusetts and New England, the IRS started publishing the data in 1991. By 1993, the Chronicle wrote an article saying, you know, New England giving is kind of lagging behind the rest of the country. And I read that article, and I thought, well, it must be because we're poor. So I looked up in the statistical abstract. No, we're the wealthiest region of the country. Why should the wealthiest region of the country give the least to philanthropy? The least. It's not that, you know, we were somewhere around the middle in average giving. The relation of our giving to our income, itemized charitable deductions to gross income, was the lowest in the country. 46, 47, 48, and 49, and 50 were all New England states. At the same time, in 1995, Connecticut was first, Massachusetts third, New Hampshire fifth in income. That struck me as kind of an interesting problem. And I thought it must be cultural, because when you compare the giving and the income numbers for the nation as a whole, it turns out the contiguous states have similar ranks. So I think it's not geographic. I think it's cultural, primarily religious. And that means that you can change that pattern without changing the economy. I mean, if we were giving low because we were poor, then you'd have to make us prosperous. That's hard to do. If you want us to give what we have already, all you have to do is change your mind. And that's an educational problem. So the Catalog for Philanthropy was created for donor education, eventually to increase and improve charitable giving. Now, we looked at the interface between the donating public and professionalized philanthropy. And one of the first things we discovered was that it was chaos, basically. It was disorganized. It was not well thought out at all. It wasn't thought out well or ill. And so we started at the beginning. What does the word philanthropy mean? Well, I used to ask people at conferences, what did it mean by philanthropy? The professionals would tell me there were many definitions. There's people in the room. When you're defining terms, you know, it's not just a matter of thinking what would be a nice definition. You have etymology, the roots of the word in other languages. You have history, and you have current usage. Current usage was virtually useless. So we went to etymology. Now, it was known who coined the word. The first recorded use of the word is on line 11 of Prometheus Bound, which had long been attributed to Aeschylus. We now think it was maybe somebody in Periclean Athens. He was 460. It's probably 2 or 3 decades later, but we don't know who it is. Regardless, we're not concerned about who wrote it. We're concerned about what was written. What was written was the story of Prometheus, in which the author took a myth of Hesiod and kind of jacked it up a few grades. Prometheus, you recall, don't you, was the Titan who created mankind out of clay. And his name meant forethought, something which only he and his mother, Earth, had. And he created these creatures, and they had no culture of any kind in the beginning. They had no learning, no skills, no tools, and so they lived in the darkness, in caves, in constant fear of their lives. Zeus, tyrannical king of the gods, who thought this was kind of an insolent gesture in the first place, was not impressed, so he decided to destroy them. But Prometheus, we are told, out of his philanthropos tropos, his humanity-loving character, gave to the creatures 2 gifts: fire, symbolizing all the arts, all technology, all skills, all knowledge, all culture, civilization, and blind hope or optimism, unknowing hope. Those 2 are mutually reinforcing. If you're armed with fire, you can afford to be hopeful. If you are hopeful, you'll put fire to good use. And that's what completed the creation of humanity. Now, did philanthropos, which was an adjective, not a noun referring to the gift, not a verb referring to giving, but an adjective referring to the character of the benefactor, what did it really mean in detail? Did it mean the love of mankind in the sense of loving everybody? Well, that would be stupid, wouldn't it? Because no one loves everybody. No one can love everybody. Any discerning human being has mixed feelings about a lot of people. So it had to mean something else. What it meant, which became clear when the Greeks adopted the concept, which they did readily, was that it was a love not of mankind in the sense of the human population, but a love of human potential, of what it is to be human. The love of what it is to be human is what philanthropy is, and it means a disinterested nourishing and support of all of our talents and resources as human beings. 40 years after this was coined, Socrates, in one of the early dialogues of Plato, is recorded as saying that what he does in giving people the benefit of his thoughts without charging them, he is doing it out of his philanthropia, his love of what it is to be human. Education is to love humanity. The Greeks actually raised this to a comprehensive cultural ideal. They were saying that any aspect of life, any profession, expresses a love of what it is to be human, a nurturing of our finest traits. And the ideal of human development was arete, excellence. So the Greeks coined another word to refer to the culture that does that, and that's paideia, which we know from Encyclopedia and Kyklos paideia, which is universal learning. The idea there is that a paideian culture is suffused, its purpose is education or self-development of the people who live there. Development as humans, empowerment as humans. Okay, so when those two words, which were made into an educational program, there are many texts support that, they're all worked out in the book if you're interested. When it was translated into Latin, it was translated as humanitas. Both paideia and philanthropia were translated as humanitas into Latin. Humanity, meaning humaneness, okay? So it was an educational and cultural ideal which now has to be translated by us into modern terms. How long did it last? It was revived in the Renaissance. Pico della Mirandola in the late 15th century, his famous oration on the dignity of man, recovered the ideal of how noble it is to be human. Living in the Renaissance was kind of like living in Republican Rome or Periclean Athens. I mean, Periclean Athens would make one excited about what it is to be human because they were inventing science, philosophy, literature, you know, the whole schmear. And that made them think about, you know, what are we? Who are we among other animals? And they thought humanity, humaneness, was a very high level of creation. So the same idea came into the Renaissance. And it came into the English language at the end of the 16th century. Francis Bacon referred to his vast contemplative ends as his philanthropia. In his essay on goodness, he said that goodness is the affecting of the weal of men, what the Grecians call philanthropia. Henry Cochrane, in the first English dictionary, 1623, made a Ciceronian U-turn and kind of made philanthropia a synonym of humanitas, humanity. So it came into the English language at the same time that the colonists came to America. And in America, they had a new situation. Blank slate, they had to create their own society. They had no cash. Land was plentiful and cheap, labor was scarce and dear, everything had to be done by volunteers. So as has often been noted, everything was done by voluntary associations. If you wanted to get something big done you couldn't do yourself, you had to get other people to work together with you. And after 150 years of this, it became a culture of collaboration, building the country, right? This became associated with philanthropy through the Enlightenment, and particularly the Scottish Enlightenment. And the book has all kinds of detailed texts, and I haven't got time to tell you about them now. But basically, the Founding Fathers were heavily influenced by the Scottish Enlightenment, and they associated what they were doing in voluntary associations with philanthropia, an educational and cultural idea. Hence, in the first Federalist paper, Alexander Hamilton, explaining for the founders, what it is that we are about in creating a constitution, said, it's often remarked that Americans are a new place in history, whereas government has always been a function of accident and force. Now we have a chance to choose our own government. This, he said, adds the inducements of philanthropy to those of patriotism. Now, he was not using the word to mean rich people helping poor people or, giving things away, good Lord. What he was saying was, this is an important point for mankind. What we are doing here in America is being done for all of mankind. And if you look at the text, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, all the founding texts, if you go through the correspondence of the founders, it's all suffused with this idea, and it's a classical notion of philanthropy. Now, what that means is that this country was predicated on philanthropy in its classical sense. That is, we were to be, this nation, a gift to mankind. We were to raise the quality of human life to a higher level. Now, you may have noticed we haven't been consistently doing that, that there's room for improvement here. And we don't want you to blame the social scientists of the 20th century for having forgotten philanthropy, but it's time to revive the word and the ideal. Luckily, we can do that because we're in a paradigm shift. Everything is in flux. The culture of philanthropy is being re-examined. We have time and dedication to try to figure out what is the best way to organize this, to promote philanthropy to the donating public. To do that, at the catalog, we've tried to design some instruments that will help. The leading one of which is the Massachusetts Philanthropic Directory. What they do is to separate out philanthropy from nonprofits. Philanthropy has nothing to do with nonprofits. No significant relation at all. Social scientists think it's a synonym for philanthropy. It's not. It includes trade associations and cemeteries and Nantucket Yacht Club and all kinds of institutions that have nothing at all to do with philanthropy. Philanthropy is about, we think, 1/6. We've gone down the list from the IRS, which you could do now. In 2005, with Google and with the data download, you can figure out what the data tells us about philanthropy. And we have extracted from the nonprofit, 38,574 or something like that, about 6,000 philanthropic charities, private initiatives for the public good, that's the social science definition, focusing on quality of life, that's the humanities definition, and significantly supported by private grants and donations. Those are philanthropic organizations. Those are our charities. For the first time, we will publish that list so everybody can see what philanthropy is. They've never been able to do that because we're always dealing with IRS data and collectives. Second thing we've done is to create a systematic taxonomy of the fields of philanthropy, which is not easy. It's taken us a long time. We kind of slid into it, but we have one now, and it's probably a work in progress. It's going to be perfected, but it takes three basic fields: nature, our relation to the environment; culture, our relations to what we think and do; and people, how we treat each other. Physica, metaphysica, ethica, if you happen to be an Aristotelian. And that branches out logically, tightly, into 200 subfields of philanthropy. So it's organized in a schematic tree so that donors, grant makers, philanthropic advisors, anybody in and around philanthropy can explore, can journey, navigate the tree. It does a number of other things, which you'll hear about November 8th if you're interested to come. But it's a new instrument that has the potential to make philanthropy, at least in Massachusetts, first in Massachusetts, systematic and comprehensive, open and accessible to all, clearly understandable. It's a new approach. Now, I haven't got time to tell you the 10 predictions that I have for the future of philanthropy. I'm sorry, that will have to await the Q&A. But what we want to, I guess the thought to leave you with is that philanthropy in Massachusetts, by becoming systematic and open and accessible to all, is going to be transformed. We have 9 community foundations working with us on this. The rest will follow. We'll ask them and all that, but I mean, we'll have almost all of them. Which means that Massachusetts will be, for the first time, an organized philanthropic community that is visible to all. And we know that that will increase charitable giving. Thank you.
You're listening to Cambridge Forum as we continue our discussion of Philanthropy Reconsidered with historian George McCully. His recent book, Philanthropy Reconsidered, explores the future of philanthropic giving in the 21st century. Well, George, you set me up. I have to ask, what are your 10 predictions for the future of philanthropy?
2 caveats. First, paradigm shifts are inherently unpredictable because they're rapid, fundamental, structural, and strategic transformations. Second one is you got to understand causation. Causation is the coincidence of conducive conditions. So if you want to make something happen, find what all the conducive conditions are, pile them up and connect them, and it'll happen. And the whole history of the catalog has been a test of that. Which means also that if you want to predict what's going to happen, look at the conducives. What are the conducives that work today in philanthropy? This is an age in which innovations are exploding. So everybody's trying new things, and they're all usually trying them on the internet. Nonetheless, I predict, first, that the new paradigm will be internet-based. That's fairly obvious, I think, to everybody. Second, that the data is going to be clarified for the first time. We're going to separate philanthropy out from nonprofits. That was a bad idea to begin with. It's never been defended, and in fact, it's indefensible from the point of view of philanthropy. From the point of view of the IRS, nonprofit doesn't mean that you don't make profits, it means that your profits can't be taxed. Okay, so data is going to be clarified. Philanthropy will be separated out and will be visible by internet technology. We are going to actually do it for every state in the country after we get through with Massachusetts. It'll take us 2 years, but it's pretty easy to do. Once you have the taxonomy, which nobody else has. Third, this will heighten public awareness about philanthropy. If they don't know what it means now, but they know there's a word, when you get it up on the internet, visible and defined, and clearly so that you can explore and manipulate and slice and dice the data, people will be aware much more of philanthropy, and particularly of small charities. 92% of charities have budgets below $2 million. The purpose of this system is to drive demand down the long tail, what Chris Anderson calls the long tail, which is all the little guys who all have websites now, but you've got to get people to go to their websites. This system will help people to go to their websites. So the next one, for the fourth thing, is that philanthropy is going to be systematically organized. Once you get a clear body of data, the impulse to organize it is irresistible, and that will happen for purposes of analysis, for purposes of education, and it's already been done, and we're going to do it for everybody else too. So people can improve on our system. That would be great, but that philanthropy will be systematically organized is inevitable. Fifth, the culture of philanthropy will be strengthened by knowledge of what it is, by use and exposure to it, and by active participation in it. People will begin to appreciate it. Now, when they come to the Massachusetts Philanthropic Directory, they're coming not only to a data set, they're coming to a whole educational kind of gestalt, a whole vocabulary, conceptualization, rhetoric, infrastructure, and modes of operation that they will learn to use on this system. Then the vocabulary will change. Instead of giving away, giving back to the third sector, to the disadvantaged, to the nonprofits, to the poor and all that, which turned off the new and emerging donors so that they didn't buy that rhetoric, and that's what impelled the beginning of the paradigm shift. People now talk about building a better life, building a better world, making a contribution, investing in philanthropy, investing in quality of life. Harvard University and Partners Health called nonprofits are highly vulnerable to Senator Grassley and other folks who think that that's, first, they are making huge profits from their investments, and the tax code never imagined institutions with billion-dollar endowments. So it's in their interest as well, the very big guys as well as the very little guys, to change the vocabulary. Don't call us nonprofits, call us philanthropy. You can't spend too much on quality of life, right? Okay, 7, restructuring. The day of the national professional organizations is approaching its end. They are all looking around for what to do now that the profession is professionalized, and professionalization is now at the grassroots level. On the net, in every educational institution, there's training. You don't need national organizations for that. So what will replace them? Maybe community foundations, which carpet the country, coast to coast, 717 of them, each responsible to donors on the one hand, charities on the other, to build capacity and to promote philanthropy. Our directories will be marketed on a wholesale model through the community foundations. They will subscribe for their regions. We'll give them the data. And people with IP addresses from those regions will go to what they think is their website. It'll be a page on our website. So restructuring is going to happen. Humanities councils. Philanthropy is no question, translated into Latin as humanitas. It's one of the humanities. The humanities in America have been promoted for since 1960. Academic humanity. And the humanities in academia, as you know, are in tough shape and have been kind of slowing going a long demise. Philanthropy is growing. You can tell by the audience here tonight, can't you? But it is. It's exploding. The Giving Pledge, the celebrity philanthropy, the popular media have glamorized it to the point that it's now chic. And by the time you get television programs called The Philanthropist, you're on the edge of a mass movement, are you not? Giving is going to increase because of the long tail phenomenon. If you have an aggregator for philanthropy, as Amazon is for books, as eBay is for used items, as iTunes and Rhapsody are for music, they drive demand down the tail, and people will discover how donors all over the world can find out charities that they're interested in, no matter who they are. 9th, philanthropy has a shot at becoming a mass movement. If it becomes chic for everybody and glamorous and interesting for everybody, then the numbers of people who participate in it self-consciously will increase. Now, once that happens, we have a shot, and you will see I've proceeded from the certain to the highly speculative. We have a shot at becoming the nation's school for values, faute de mieux. That is, what else? Politics? I don't think so. Education, they left values behind long ago. Philanthropy is about values. It's about identifying your own values and expressing them through giving and volunteering to make the world a better place and make people more human, yourself included. So about that time, philanthropy, if its culture is strong, if it is a mass movement, if it is about values and it's clearly articulated, people will learn their values starting in school from engaging in philanthropy. That's our hope.
That is hopeful. Well, thank you for those words of hope. Now I'd like to be a little more cynical. It strikes me that the way you have set this up, you already have identified a cadre of people who look at themselves as professional, who see philanthropy and the nonprofit world as their bailiwick, and they may or may not be driven by values, but I get the sense that they feel like they know what they're doing, and they're not interested in having anybody come in and look over their shoulder. They're not interested in this new kind of philanthropic partnership. I mean, it may be okay if Bono or a star or a celebrity comes and wants a photo op with them, but if Joe Blow comes and wants a photo op with them or wants to be involved in the policies and the values, that is not going to sit very well. So how are you going to reconcile these two cultures?
Yes, well, we don't know if it'll sit well or not. We think if you look at evangelical fundamental religion, it's all about values. If you look at the politics, it's about values. Philanthropy, unlike those other things, does not tell you what your values should be. It asks you to identify your values yourself, and then it says, no matter who you are, we don't care. Bizarre, deviant behavior, whatever. There are charities just like you that you will enjoy supporting because they're just like you. They are extensions of who you are. You can define yourself through your philanthropy. And if we can persuade people that they can put down the charities that they support on the tree, a taxonomic tree, and see, okay, is this who I am? Wait a minute, I'm green. I'm not supporting any nature charities. Fine, here are all of them that you can consider. So what we're creating is a way for people to identify their own values and exercise them. Now, should people identify and exercise their values? Will they resent that? Well, we're not going to be looking over their shoulder because we literally do not care. One of the one of the very good things about Gates and Buffett's giving pledge is that I was saying, well, I don't know, all this money is going to go to the wrong causes. And Gates and Buffett say, we don't care. What we want is for people to get involved, and enjoy it. It's fun, it's interesting. And they're using the word philanthropy, which is excellent. So this is not a top-down, oppressive new structure that's going to, in any way, define for people who they are. What it's going to do is to give them an opportunity to define themselves in a more forceful, successful, fulfilling way, I think. Now, who knows if it's going to work? Might not work. Well, we're going to try it anyway.
Well, as I said, that is optimistic. I would expect that the people who manage the top-down part of the system today will like it that way and will try and hold on to that authority. And so I will be interested to see how that prediction comes out.
It's not going to happen tomorrow.
Well, I have time. I have a long horizon. I would like you to talk a little bit more about the new donors, the new wealthy, the people you said were turned off by the save the poor, give to the poor rhetoric, and
Yes.
who are interested in building a new world. When did this come about? Who are they? And how are they expressing their philanthropic values?
Okay, the paradigm shift was created by globalization of the American economy, the IT revolution, the new wealth that was generated for a new population, new demographics of wealth, people who were younger, who were still parenting, who became more wealthy than they'd ever dreamed of, and who were asking in their 30s and 40s, is this all there is? And a number of them got involved in, for whatever reason, we don't care, in setting up foundations, donor-advised funds, and getting interested in philanthropy. They were at a disadvantage, however, as we all are, because there's no way to find out these days what's out there. So they, okay, what are you really interested in? Most of them said they were interested in leveling the playing field. They were interested in education for disadvantaged children. They were expressing their parenting, really. And as a group, these people naturally were extremely well researched by the fundraisers of this world to find out what makes them tick. Well, what makes them tick is that they wanted to bring to philanthropy the same kind of can-do, no-nonsense, by God, I can change the world, smarts that they thought they had in commerce. And so they created what was called venture philanthropy around 2000. It was very fashionable. We had a section of the catalog devoted to venture philanthropy, which was like venture capitalism, where people would make major investments at high risk. They were risk, they didn't care. They'd been through risk before. They'd been through startups before. They had taken big bets and been successful. So they started to apply the same techniques to philanthropy. Part of that involved bringing to philanthropy their business skills. This has not worked well because philanthropy is really quite different from competitive commerce for a number of reasons that I needn't go into, but I can do that. But anyway, they came to philanthropy intending to transform it. They thought the foundations of the world were stodgy and conservative and just not enough energy, not enough entrepreneurial, get up and go. So they did their own philanthropy. Now they were told, well, that's wonderful that you're giving back. No, they weren't giving back. They were just bringing skills to a new place. And they've made serious attempts at remaking the world, changing at social reform, social innovation. Any historian can tell you this is not something you can do with money. So they're younger, they're more venturesome, they are more interested in, they're still parenting and still young with their outlook on the world, and they're future-oriented like Prometheus, and they want to make the world a better place. They want to accomplish in philanthropy what they did in business. So they're much different. So a salesman coming to them from a charity offering them a conventional program is just of no interest to them at all. You come to them with a big new idea, they might get interested. So there's a whole literature on how to approach these people. But basically it's a new population for us.
You're listening to Cambridge Forum featuring George McCully discussing Philanthropy Reconsidered. It's time now to take some questions from the audience. So be sure that you come up to the microphone in the center aisle to ask your questions. And while you're thinking of your questions, I have another one. I always have another question. Once upon a time, people used to say, people give to people. There was an assumption that there had to be some kind of personal contact. How does that personal contact survive the internet era?
I think it's inevitable. I think some things won't change. I think people do give to people, and the new and emerging donors are looking for people that speak their language and have their values and their sense of entrepreneurship, and are thinking big. And so, we have people like that in philanthropy. It's not trained out of them in the graduate schools, and so I think that there are some things that just don't change, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But the advantage of a directory system is that if you want to do something, now, but before the directory, if you wanted to do something, you kind of went ahead and did it. You didn't know who else was doing anything similar to it. You didn't know what had been tried before. Institutions have been set up during the paradigm shift to study the nation's philanthropy, new ideas, so that if you're in Massachusetts and you want to start something new, you can go to a charity and they will tell you, they will look around for you, is this being done? Now, it takes them weeks to do that. With the Massachusetts Philanthropic Directory, extended into 50 states, you can do it in minutes. I mean, it's just speeding the whole thing up. The other day in Seth Godin's blog, he talked about crowd-initiated innovation, crowd-accelerated innovation. And the idea there is that when you have a new idea and it goes up on the web, on YouTube, it will be instantly viewed by thousands or millions of people who have the same interest. And they will borrow what you've done, adapt it to what they've done, and make progress. So that the process of economic innovation in business now, this is the same guy that wrote The Long Tail, in business, the process of innovation has been just rapidly accelerated. And we expect that to happen to the directories. People will look on and they'll see, well, what's obvious to them would be a great enhancement. Great. We want that to happen. So it's the addition of a tool, the systematic tool, should help people do what they want to do. It should make it easier and faster and better and more systematic, more complete.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about some of the online tools that currently exist, and they really seem to take the possibility of human interaction out of the whole process. And I'm speaking now as somebody seeking funds. The online application is not satisfactory. The fact that no phone number is listed is not satisfactory. Viewing the website may or may not be helpful because the information on the website may or may not be up to date. So without the ability to actually make some human contact as a seeker of funds, the internet is not an ideal process.
Yeah, I mean, I sympathize with that. I don't think that's the internet's fault.
No, I don't think it is either, but I think that it creates an additional distance.
Well, it either does or doesn't. I mean, I'm sure you tweet and, do all those other things that I don't even know the names of. Social networking, you see. Now, I read a book recently by Bruce Sievers, who was for years head of the Haas Foundation, and the guy just doesn't, he's still saying that Robert Putnam is right, that we've lost our civic spirit, our fellowship, our sense of community, and yet he doesn't mention the internet and social networking. It's just that our community impulses, our fellowship, our desires for fellowship and colleagueship have been put on another medium, so that in the crowd-initiated, crowd-accelerated innovation, he starts out with a little kid in China, I think, who is doing gymnastic street dancing, and he's doing things, that no child ought to be able to do with ease. And he said, that child's YouTube thing has been seen by all the children in the world who are now learning how to do the same things, and their skills are rising up. So there are communities out there. They're just different kinds of communities. Now they can, write on Facebook and Twitter and tweet and all the other things, and they're talking to each other, For all I know, some of you are tweeting right now. God, what a boring lecture. Right.
Yes.
Actually, I want to follow on to that. And grassroots organizations who have members and donors, how do you view the future for them? And should they be still focusing on members and donors, or should they really be focusing on donors and?
You asked that question. The catalog, as you know, has been from the beginning focusing on small charities. And the reason we did that is because they, under the age of print medium, 20th century, they couldn't afford public exposure. We gave it to them, to the best audience in, hundreds of thousands of affluent families. So it was an adaptation of a new medium to what they did, and some of them succeeded hugely, attracting new donors that have given them millions of dollars. And now, the growth trajectory of a small charity when they're invisible and can't afford visibility is not very great. And they have to work with a working board and the immediate circles of acquaintance and all that, and it's an uphill struggle. These days, you can start a small charity. All charities just start small when they start, unless Bill Gates starts them, and you create a website for almost nothing. It doesn't have to be a great website. And with the directory, you'll get help from the Catalog for Philanthropy and having great images and, tips on how to present yourselves to donors. You'll immediately be visible to all the donors on the planet who are interested in what you're doing, if they can find you. The directory makes it possible to find you. That's what, and by exposing donors and grant makers and philanthropic advisors to whole fields of philanthropy instead of current search technology aims very rapidly at finding one thing. And if you know a charity's name, you can find it in seconds. This system will introduce you to a whole field in a whole region helping a whole population of your designation when you set up your parameters for your search. It'll tell you everybody that's out there. And when we get it for the country, it'll tell you everybody in the country is out there if you want. So it'll make it much easier for small charities to become totally visible. And if the pattern holds here that has held in books, used items, music, giving will increase. Chris Anderson, in his book, The Long Tail, quotes a guy who was the CEO of Rhapsody. And the guy said, you go into a bar and there's a jukebox, and it's got yellow and green and red lights, just like jukeboxes always had, except instead of 150 songs, it has 10,000 albums that are downloadable from the internet. He said, now we have this internet resource. What percentage of those albums are played every quarter? Anderson, thinking it was probably 3 to 5%, but suspecting it was a trick because he knew the guy, said 20%. The guy said 98%. 98% are played every quarter. Why? Because, he said, teenagers with iPods have 1,000 songs in their own personal library. Do you think they got those from the top 10 on the local radio station? Not a bit. They went to, all these places, and it said, well, if you like this, you'll like that. We'll do the same thing for philanthropy. If you're interested in this field, here they are, and you can choose among them. And we send you to their websites, So we're giving to every small charity the greatest help that the technology will produce to make them visible and accessible and persuasive, attractive to donors. That's got to help. I don't know. Yes, Deborah.
Hi there, George. I want to presume a little bit on both my role as a co-conspirator with you, and if you break down the Latin, that of course means being in spirit together, and my another role of having served as a strategic technology advisor to the Cambridge Forum. So I want to press you a little to do an on-the-spot consult or case study yourself. Here we have the Cambridge Forum, which is the philanthropic organization par excellence about bringing civil discourse to the public square, civic engagement, developing human potential, the education throughout the life cycle. What a great organization, what's not to love?
Yeah.
Okay, so now, Cambridge Forum needs to go from the industrial model of philanthropy to the internet age model of philanthropy. Mm-hmm. And I just want to put in a plug. On page 68 of your book, there's a chart that, as you know, I love very much about that shift in paradigm. Can you talk about what that might mean for Cambridge Forum in making that transition? And I'm thinking about how Cambridge Forum needs to develop, first of all, the funding to get into the internet age in earnest,
Yeah, right.
but then also needs to use its internet age powers to open out and do more of that public benefit. So let's have a little case study on the spot, George.
Okay.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, it's interesting.
He said, I'm taking notes.
Okay.
About the time that your technology advisor asked someone like me, of my age, my generation, my general,
I also
to give
want to
them
point out
ideas,
that Pat did not
but
put
I'm
me
happy
up to this.
I'm happy to. First, when radio was invented, I can't remember it, but I've read about it, they used to have forums on the air in which they broadcast these things. Well, these days, Chris Anderson in his acceleration video clip said that if you create a video clip, more people will listen to it than will read any piece of writing circulated anywhere. Now, my modest little book, which has been, I was asked, a couple of months ago, how many people have read your book? I said, golly, I don't know, hundreds. Well, how many people have read the Wikipedia article, which I wrote with the ideas in the book? About 1,500 an hour. since it's been up, millions of people. Now, they came there. We don't know what they read or learned or what. But the circulation on the internet is just orders of magnitude huger. So I think to create and Anderson argues that a video clip, because it's a better medium, a more accessible medium, and people can learn more than they can from the printed page. He says, well, speaking for himself, presumably, a trained textual analyst can learn an awful lot from a page of print. But anyway, I think if you're presumably this video, so you have video clips, put them on YouTube under subjects, and make them accessible that way, you probably will reach more people than you do over the radio and TV. I think. I don't know. You tell me. Can you count that? You can count the number of hits. You can tell how long people stay there. Do they watch it? So it might be, but I think the internet is, as I said, my predictions, medium of the future. So you've got to just use it to multiply your audience, and also your fundraising structure, because
I can tell you a little bit. We do
Yeah.
put these videos do go up on the WGBH Forum Network's website, which is vast and growing.
yes,
And they do keep track of viewerships. They can tell how long any person clicking in stays with the video. They can tell where in the world they're coming from, and they keep cumulative data, which they pass along to us when they
Yeah.
have time. So we do get some feedback from
Yeah.
that video.
I want to encourage you to tell Pat about how to get there in terms of raising the capital that's necessary to really be able to move into the information age, as well as what specific social media strategies. Of course, Pat has had her ear filled by me about different social media strategies, but there's a kind of problem of how do you get jump-started into the full use of the information age.
Yes.
And you certainly know about donor education. How would you coach Pat to educate donors about the need to create, say, a social media infrastructure that's even stronger and far-reaching than what they have now?
Well, I think Pat can probably put together a pretty persuasive case for the value of what is being done here. A lot of fundraising is the same old, same old. You find people who are interested. We have had a problem with the catalog since it was started, in that the catalog is not, we're first a unique organization. There are no other organizations that are promoting philanthropy as such, no. So what I always hear from foundations is, oh, that doesn't satisfy our guidelines. Well, of course it doesn't satisfy our guidelines. Your guidelines are about other things. So we try to sell them on citizenship. The Catalog for Philanthropy was created by a consortium of foundations, corporations, and donors on behalf of the philanthropic community for the benefit of the philanthropic community. And that worked for the first 3 years. I have found with the directories, we have about 15 foundation co-sponsors. There are a couple more that are coming on, and I'm trying to get a geographic distribution statewide. But we have found that individuals are more forward-looking, more responsive, more interested in innovation. And we bring interesting people together to talk about philanthropy. And they're all active in philanthropy, and they're all interesting people. So they love this. Now, have we gotten all the money we need? No. And until we get all the money we need, I'm not going to be too free with advice to other people. No, that's not true. Charities do not compete with each other. There's no zero-sum game in philanthropy. Philanthropy is growing. So our mutual interest is to promote philanthropy itself so that it will grow. More dollars will come in and become available, and to make it easy for people to find the Cambridge Forum. It will be interesting to see. We ought to make some kind of test case to see whether or not, and we will, when the directory is tested in its beta year, we're going to track everything very closely. And we expect in 2 giving seasons, a 12-month period has 2 year-end holiday giving seasons. And our hope is that giving will increase, that people will use the directories in the giving season. Now, it may take longer than that to teach them how to do that and all that kind of stuff. We don't know. But if it does, then that changes how you meet people, how you can, find them through the internet. I'm sure you're better at this than I am. You find a lot of people. And that's what I do. I try to find the people and then get to know them and bring them into the circle and talk to them. It takes a long time, as you know, to raise a major gift. It takes months. Yes?
I wanted to ask what's happened to the social science that was a foundation of the development and the
what will
strength.
happen to the social sciences
What has happened to
themselves?
to the social science that's informed so much of the architecture of, where the giving goes? And I bring that up in context of, and maybe because I'm in the nonprofit sector, that there's so much discussion about evidence-based models or ways of doing work, lots of measurements, metrics of outcomes and impact. And how does, one assumes that an educated giver, donor, wants to know those things, but it seems like it's not front and center. So just would love to hear your perception of...
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery to me why social science never looked at the data about philanthropy. Why is that? Why wasn't a systematic directory created long ago? Now, under telephone and print, you couldn't do it. Technologically, it was impossible. If you believe that there are 38,574 charities in Massachusetts, and you want to call them up to find out what field they're in because there's no internet, it would take you about a half hour to locate the town they're in, find their phone number, call the charity, find somebody who understands what you're talking about, talk to them and get the information. With the internet and Google, you can do it in 30 seconds in 2005, and I think it's faster now. So it was impossible for a long time, but nobody was trying it either. So now, appearances to the contrary notwithstanding, I have nothing against the social sciences in particular. I think it's fine that they exist, and I want them to continue, and they will, believe me. But all we're looking for is a balance in addressing philanthropy between social science, which is useful, and the humanities, which is useful in a different way. These are about values. This is about dynamics, social dynamics. Once we get the data cleared away, so that people know what to look at from the first place, then social scientists should be turned loose on the data and see what they find. We're going to create an archive on the directory so that people can publish their research on the directory under their names. It'll be terrific. And it'll be organized and people can then look at the archive for research. So I think the social scientists in our NOVA, for example, which is the professional scholarly organization of philanthropic studies, right? The few humanists who belong feel themselves in a kind of countercultural stance, resisted in getting their papers accepted for panels. They really feel embattled and oppressed. I'm confident that that's going to end. For one thing, I cited a number of them in my book because I want to give these people publicity. I want to give other people the sense that there's a movement out there of humanists who are getting interested in philanthropy. Oh my God. But I think the scholarship of the field will become more holistic and better balanced. And if the values are clearly articulated from the humanist side, the social scientists will have something substantive to study technically and procedurally. Why not? So on the one hand, it might be that the social scientists who are in charge of philanthropy will not appreciate the value of a humanistic interpretation. And will say, well, what do we need? The Greeks. I mean, please, Pico della Mirandola, are you kidding? America even. That was 200 years ago. But the fact is that the old paradigm didn't work well. Even on its own terms, it didn't work well. It's like Swiss cheese of fallacies. So on the practical argument alone, you can show them that that model didn't work well. This model that we're developing, which is amenable to social scientific analysis study, should work better. We don't know. If they want to make it better, we welcome that. Everybody in philanthropy is on the same team. We're all collaborating. So, anybody who has any good suggestions, we'll suck them up and put them out there.
I guess I wanted to get a word about the notion of foundations and whether, approaching them. Well, we did research and found an excellent, I'm on the board of Cambridge Forum, and we found 2 foundations that we thought would be perfect. And we got negative responses. And they both said, we essentially said, we only fund that which we already have been funding. And right now, everything is down. The stock market. 2008, of course, everybody took a big hit on that. And I assume the smaller foundations that were potentially exciting to fund Cambridge Forum probably took the most significant hit. But my question, I guess, is on the issue of cultivating foundations, do you think that there is a better way to do it than just simply writing a letter? They just simply say, write a letter.
Yep.
And I always fear, though, if you don't do that, they essentially will, think you're kind of coming through the back door.
Yes.
Who are you?
Wow.
We don't get, we clearly set the rules.
Yes.
And some foundations don't even give money these days, And one of the most largest foundations, is it the Bard Foundation?
Yes.
They don't even...
Don't call us, we'll call you.
And that was a couple of $1 billion from the sale of that cable company. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what we should be doing. Obviously, you need to cultivate, but how do you cultivate and not become obnoxious?
Yes.
And not,
Good question, and I think it's a problem, and it's a challenge for small charities, and always has been. There was a study in the early 90s that showed that 80% of the dollars in philanthropy went to 20% of the charities in philanthropy, and 80% of the charities got only 20% of the dollars. That's a dysfunctional economy. Now, there are 4,000 foundations in Massachusetts. Half of them have been created within the last decade. The foundation directory of AGM has 300 foundations listed. Why? Because they asked them if they wanted to be listed. Never. Bad procedure. We are going to publish for Massachusetts a directory of foundations. And we're going to classify them with the same taxonomy that we have the charities, so that Massachusetts will have an integrated system where the smallest charity can find all the foundations in Massachusetts, no matter where they're hiding, and get in touch with them, figure out how to do that. Now, it's not that hard to get in touch with them. I never submit just a letter to it. I never submit a proposal that has not been invited by a staff member. I never, how do you get those invitations? By talking to people and by giving them good ideas. They need good ideas. We got a lot of good ideas. So we can help them do their jobs better, and they can help us do our jobs better. So it's a mutuality. But one part of the answer to your question is systemic. That is, create a directory of foundations, yoke it to the same taxonomy that the charities have, and with a systematic taxonomy you can do that. And then, they will contact each other, will they not? Now, the reason they don't want to be known is that they fear an avalanche of useless, expansively beside the point proposals. My argument, until proven wrong, which is always possible, is that this will clear the air, that you will get less irrelevant proposals if you are carefully taxonomized. And once we have our list, and they're required by law to be public, there's this idea of, no, we're going to hide is not even an option. So we get the list from the IRS. We will contact them and say, like it or not, we're going to publish you. We have this taxonomy. Please check off the fields in which you would like to receive proposals. Well, that's in their interest to do. And, it's in the interest of a charity to be seen in as many fields as possible, and it's in its foundation to be seen as few as possible. But if you've got only 6,000 charities and 8,000 or 4,000 foundations, I mean, it's a match made in heaven. So I think foundation fundraising is going to change. It won't become less personal. I think it'll become more personal, just more broadly personal. And we'll have to all figure out together how best to do it. But the point is that in a paradigm shift, the ground is changing, the structure is changing. So we're about to have a new structure, and we've got to give it our best thought, how to make it work together. Well, you can line up at the mic.
This might be kind of a boring question, but I have just nomenclature. We talk about nonprofits, and these seem to me to be organizations that are doing something good, whether it's Doctors Without Borders or the Greater Boston Food Bank or whatever. And you said you don't use nonprofit.
Never.
And I think you're using charities. I think of like Catholic Charities as a donor organization.
Yes.
But it sounds like you're using charity as the recipient.
Yes.
And philanthropy, if I just say one more thing and I'll sit down. Philanthropy I have thought of as the practice of supporting, the practice of giving and providing support to these nonprofits. So, thank you.
Okay. First, on the question of the word nonprofit, it's an unfortunate locution, and as I said, there is no significant relation between nonprofit and philanthropic charity. What should we call them instead? Well, the English language is pretty fertile. We could call them charities, but that because in law, they're all charitable corporations. They're all public charities. A lot of people think that a charity is rich people helping poor people, and so cultural institutions and environmental institutions sometimes resist being called charities. They think that's degrading. Well, it's not. A. B. You can always call them philanthropies in the plural. This is my philanthropy. It means the organization I've set up, and this is what I do, how I do my philanthropy. I think, the only reason to use the word nonprofit is to conform to a convention, but it's a convention which is very shallow-rooted. It grew up in the 70s. The word nonprofit did not appear in the New York Times until 1909. It didn't appear in a title of a doctoral dissertation until the 60s. And then it crept slowly into the language. And the book by one of our colleagues at Harvard called Inventing the Nonprofit Sector neglects to tell us who invented it. What would the word, what did it mean? What it means is a nonprofit or a non-governmental organization, which is the international analog, is neither fish nor fowl. It's neither government, which is public initiatives for public good, or business, private initiatives for private good. It's private initiatives for public good. It's a hybrid. And that ought to be pretty clear. Now, if you add that they're significantly dependent on private donations, that clinches it. So we will look at their, see whether they are. And if there are some that are left out that think they should not have been excluded, all they have to do is raise their hand and prove to us that that's what they are. If they think they've been put in the wrong field, they can tell us. We're very open. What we want is a consensus list. That's all we want, the truth, based on evidence. So over a period of several years, we hope we'll get something, and then we'll all agree. We'll automatically update it every year as the IRS does their stuff. So yes, it is difficult to change your vocabulary. I did from the beginning of the catalog. I decided to call them something else. And the word I chose was charities. I don't know, philanthropy sounded to me a little bit like 4 souls instead of 3. And there was talk. And people always say, well, what do we call them? Well, come on. So yeah, changing your mind does involve change, and that's stressful. Learning is stressful. But I think we've got to get rid of it because it is a disservice to philanthropy to call it by what it is not. We don't call cats non-dogs. If we did, we would still be throwing stones at each other. The purpose of language is to define things by what they are and do, not what they aren't and don't. Call it a non-profit. That opens up a lot of things that have nothing to do at all with philanthropy. And all one has to do is look at one page of the data. I'm tempted to put the IRS master list on our website and say to people, just pick a page, right, page 58, and look at it. And you tell us how many of those charities you think are philanthropic and how many aren't. And they will be amazed at how few there are. The reason we got into this is that I happened to do that. I looked at a page, and I could tell that almost all of it was not philanthropy. They weren't eligible for the Massachusetts catalog. I have no brief at all to keep the word nonprofit. The second question you asked, what was that at the end?
I said that, to me, I have always understood philanthropy to be
yes.
the practice of supporting a nonprofit.
Yeah.
A charity or whatever you're going to call it, and it sounds like you're using philanthropies as almost synonymous with charities then.
No, if I gave that impression, I'm wrong. What I think philanthropy is the love of what it is to be human. Now, expressed in charitable giving and volunteering, that means that the benefactor, having identified their values and expressed them in a way that promotes a public good as distinct from a private good, is a bigger and better human being for it. That people can grow by defining themselves through philanthropy. And when the beneficiaries of particularly people charities that help people, it helps clarify things to point out that what they're doing is empowering people. Philanthropy is about power. It's about empowering people to become more fully excellent what they are as human beings. That's the point of it. And if it doesn't do that, then something's wrong. If philanthropists will think of themselves as doing a kind of continuing education, by which I mean self-development, and using philanthropy to develop themselves, I think first they will learn that it's possible, and they will enjoy it, and they will become better people, and their beneficiaries, knowing that that's the purpose of this. The purpose of this is, find your job. Why? Why a job? Because we want everybody. Why did Gates, identify childhood diseases? Because he's being very clear. He wants everybody, he thinks everybody on the planet has a right to a healthy and productive life. That's talking about human empowerment. So, a little clarity. All I'm saying is, let's clear it up. Let's get away the fog, get away the bad data, clarify it, let's make it visible, let's look at it, let's do it together, and we'll become better. Think of what it would be. You can say, if you look at your philanthropy on the tree, I'm interested in women's education in the third world. I have no charities that do that. Well, there are a lot of charities that do that. And think of what it would be if every American had a foreign policy and it were expressed through philanthropy. Think of what it would do for our country's image abroad. Think of what it would do for our sense of the rest of the world. We could dwarf foreign aid, which is not so big anymore, simply through, if everybody put that into their portfolio. And so we've been promoting that for the last few years in the catalog. With what results, I don't know. A very small percentage. A lot of people in the new and emerging donor class are cosmopolitan because their businesses are, and they're interested in international philanthropy. But they don't know enough about it. Again, it's not cataloged for them. we will create a directory for the country of charities based in America who work abroad. And, somebody will figure out a way to vet them. And that's, that will help.
I think I want to ask you one last thing, George. To hear you talk about self-development and growth through philanthropy is very encouraging, and I think some of the models we see in terms of the celebrities and the stars and Bill Gates and Ted Turner are good models to show the world what else needs to be done to create a culture of giving for all of those individuals out there who may not have any connection to a charitable organization except perhaps their church or a community cause that they are interested in support. How do you teach children? How do you teach teenagers? How do you teach college students that giving is empowering to themselves as well as to others?
I think by doing it, I think, there's been a lot of work done on education in the family. One of the strongest correlations with a person who's active philanthropic as an adult is what their parents did. We know that when a family sits down around a table and decides what they're going to do with their charitable giving that year, that each member of the family is showing themselves to the rest of the family at their finest. They're not, we all see each other at not our finest, do we not? But not around the kitchen table when you're talking about charitable giving. So it's an important teaching moment for everybody to say what they're interested in. And it's very interesting what children come up with. We've had this experience with the catalog where they go through the catalog together as a family. We've always encouraged that from the first year. And so it's a matter of teaching by doing, I think. And the experience itself does it. And my classmate, Ted Turner, is a prime example. Ted was at the other end of the student body from where I was when we were undergraduates. He was thrown out in his junior year. He had a terrible time. The guy was wild. And he has said, now, he gave $1 billion to the UN Foundation. He said, everybody ought to try philanthropy. I have never had so much fun in my life, and he's had a lot of fun in his life, as what I've done with my philanthropy. It is an enjoyable thing to do. It makes you feel good about yourself. It makes people, respect you. There's been all kinds of studies of that by the social scientists. So I think it's a matter of just getting involved.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much, George McCully.